The idea that consensus sort of is birthed by common idea, I think, is right. But consensus, in my mind, is really birthed by controversy. You have to allow an opportunity for everybody to put their piece on the table. And I think in the way our governance is done is it allows those different perspectives to be on the table, and at the same time allows the controversy to be basically moved aside, quite frankly, when in fact it becomes to the point that it's dysfunctional. And so out of the controversy, though, becomes the obvious question of, okay, if you and I don't agree on A, what do we agree on? And often what we agree on is the problem and the need to solve it. So now we can say, okay, if A isn't where we agree, what are the other options? And now you can say, well, what about B? And here's my version of C. And then somehow we can work to the place that we have that common value. And I think the structure is totally designed to do that exact kind of conversation. Anytime you get a very eclectic group of people in the room, like our membership is, how do you create an environment in which that group of people actually has the opportunity to express their differences, and then at the same time be able to ultimately in the end to say, despite our differences, there are some things we agree on, these are the things that we'll work on, and then actually make a commitment to do that. So I think part of what we've tried to do is look for ways in which our members have the opportunity to actually have that dialogue. In fact, we were formed as the National Dialogue on Cancer, and for the first 5 years of our life, we were an organization that did nothing but dialogue. And then the members themselves got antsy and said, well, wait a minute, we should be doing more than just dialoguing, we should be doing action, which prompted us then to have a conversation around, well, how would we change our organization in order to be able to do that? And that's when we moved to the governance model and became a 501c3 C change, with a governance model that essentially respects the fact that we have the three sectors engaged: public, private, not-for-profit. So I think on that side of things, a real success story is that shift in governance. Now, another success story is the kind of leadership we've been able to garner. The people who sit on our board are very busy, very capable people, come from a variety of different backgrounds, and have all been able to come to the table and transcend whatever their individual sector interests are, and even their own organization and personal interests. So we've been blessed with a remarkably good group of people. That means you have to have a nominating committee that looks for people who have that capacity, and our nominating committee, like our board, is also structured by three-sector membership and time-limited terms.
Can you say a word about your principal convener, George Bush Sr., and how, and Barbara Bush, and how their convening authority and their ability to bring this group together has worked for Sea Change?
Sure. Well, as I said earlier, I think the story from Sea Change's point of view actually is that had President Bush not personally written to these 100 people and said, I'd like you to come to College Station and talk about collaborative work in cancer, I think a good many of the people in the room would have totally ignored anybody else saying, let's do that. So in many ways, we were blessed to have a former president who was willing to do that. But I think he's done three things that have been enormously successful for us. One is he has stayed engaged throughout this. He comes to every meeting, sits through every session we have. If there's a 15-minute break, at 14 minutes, he's back in his chair, as does Mrs. Bush. I don't want to mitigate that because she's also been very active and has done a great deal for us individually. The second thing is he's always said that the expertise is in the room in our members, and he isn't telling anybody what to do. He's simply saying, you tell us what needs to be done and how we can be helpful. And I think that's really critically important in all this. And I think the third thing is they've never had a personal agenda other than solving the cancer problem. It's not like we believe X test or X treatment or X prevention should be on the table and let's do more of that. They've always been willing to basically go with the group at large. And I just think that's a remarkable gesture of leadership. He has insisted from day one this whole thing be bipartisan. So he's always asking, well, who are the Democrats that are going to be engaged in this? When we have governors get involved with us, like Governor Minner, Governor Wise, former Governor Wise of West Virginia, Governor Ridge of Pennsylvania, we've always looked for that bipartisanship. So I think one thing he does is insist that that be an integral part of how we do business, which allows us to retain that nonpartisan approach to things. He's talking to everybody in the room and he treats everybody equally. And I think that's a critical piece of this, because often in coalitions or cooperative kinds of things we do, there are a few heavy hitters and then there's the rest of us. I don't ever sense that anybody felt less than equal in his eyes and in their contribution to what we could do. And that meant that players with large resources didn't get treated or differently than players with small resources.
But what were some of the turning points that really that you can now look back on as being critical?
Well, the first turning point was the first meeting, where we had this very eclectic group, many of whom came only because President Bush put them in the room. And we had an opportunity in that meeting to talk about why we hadn't had collaboration. And what surfaced in that was that a lot of turf and ego existed within the cancer community, and that was a reason, and a sort of natural reason, why people didn't collaborate more. President Bush put his foot down pretty firmly when that arose and simply said, in this organization, turf and ego are non-existent. We're going to be leaving those things at the door, and our conversations are going to address things where our turf and ego aren't necessary to their accomplishment. And that allowed people, I think, to shed some baggage that typically gets in the way. That was sentinel point number one. I think sentinel point number two really came about when the members themselves said, you know, we've been talking a lot about these problems, we're learning about a lot of things, we're talking about solutions to those problems, but we're not part of those solutions, and therefore we have to take action. We've made a number of important structural changes as we have evolved. And today we have probably 2.5 times the members engaged in our actual work as were engaged, say, 3 or 4 years ago. And again, while that's not a momentous moment in time, the fact that our members are there, they're talking to us, they're telling us what they think, they're constantly pressuring us to make additional changes that will accommodate a changing environment around it, is something I feel really good about. Because if we are our members and that's not happening, then we're nowhere. And I think that the care and feeding of, in our case, a membership organization, our members, but even in any kind of collaborative, even if it's an informal collaborative, the care and the feeding of the members at the end of the day is what really gets people to stay at the table when it gets tough in terms of the conversation or some of the individual relationships that occur. And I think, again, in leadership development, the role of good leaders, and President Bush is a natural, but so is our chair and vice chair and our board, are natural people at keeping people motivated, engaged, and interested, and that's a critical piece of the action.
Tom, thank you so much, and congratulations on